Hello, and welcome to our webinar, From Scarcity to Strength, Enriching and Expanding the Educator Pipeline. My name is Tiffany Taylor, and I have the pleasure of serving as a partner and Chief People and Impact Officer at GSB Ventures, and I am thrilled to have you all with us today for this important conversation. This webinar is co-hosted by Presence, and Presence is innovating in every respect and is focused on how schools assess and address student special education and mental health needs through remote assessments and teletherapy services for K-12 schools throughout the country. Today, we're talking about the educator pipeline, and I want to set the stage for this conversation, and I want to ground us in the data. 86% of U.S. K-12 public schools reported challenges hiring teachers for the 23-24 school year, with 83% reporting trouble hiring for non-teacher positions such as classroom aides, transportation staff, and mental health professionals, according to data released by the National Center for Education Statistics. And federal data shows that 21% of public schools were not fully staffed in special education at the start of the 23-24 school year, which represents higher levels of reported shortages than any other teaching specialty. So as a former classroom teacher, a former school leader, and a lifelong educator, I know how important this conversation is, and I'm really excited to explore some of the latest recruitment and retention strategies, transformative approaches to professional development, and cutting-edge technologies designed to amplify the impact of existing teachers and specialized staff in attracting new talent. Our panelists today include two distinguished district leaders. First, we have Dr. Kimberley Donaldson James, Superintendent for the Willis Independent School District in Texas. Dr. James joins Willis ISD from Corpus Christi ISD, where she served as the Deputy Superintendent and Chief of Staff from 2019 to 2021. With a career in education that began in 1990, Dr. James has held various leadership roles, including principalships and district administration, and she led CCISD's post-pandemic rebound, significantly improving accountability scores for 22 of 25 campuses, achieving B ratings or better for 39 of 57 campuses by 2022. Our second district leader is Dr. Drewana Bey, Deputy Chancellor for District Columbia Public Schools. Dr. Bey's mission is to interrupt and eliminate inequities that create barriers for children and communities of color within the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Dr. Bey's unwavering belief in the brilliance and talent of DCPS students and staff is what anchors her commitment to K-12 public education. She's a native of Prince George's County, Maryland, and Dr. Bey is a lifelong learner and has been an educator for over 24 years. We also have a few edtech innovators with us, including Kate Eberle Walker, CEO of Presence. Kate is an education industry leader, author, and working mom with more than 20 years of experience leading high-profile education companies, including the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. She also led strategy investments for Kaplan, a large and diversified global education company. And last but not least, we have Jean-Claude Brizard, CEO of Digital Promise. Digital Promise is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing equitable education systems through research, practice, and technology. Previously, Jean-Claude served as a senior advisor and deputy director at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, focused on PK-16 education and supporting Washington State's educational system. He has also held leadership roles as the chief executive of Chicago Public Schools, superintendent of schools for Rochester, New York, and various positions within the New York City Department of Education, including regional superintendent. Folks, we have a dynamic group with us, and with their combined years in education, this should be a thought-provoking conversation, and I imagine you may have a few questions. So please know those questions are welcome, and we encourage you to share those in the chat, and there's some written instructions that are being highlighted now, and we'll include them at the Q&A portion at the end. So before we dive in, I would love to have each panelist give voice to why the work they are doing is so important. So we're going to love to start with Dr. James, and then we'll hear from Dr. Bey, Kate, and then Jean-Claude. Dr. James?
Thank you so much, Tiffany. That word for me would be sustainability.
All right, sustainability. Dr. Bey?
So Dr. James took my words. So I'm going to give you a different response. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and give you two words: continuous improvement.
All right, sustainability and continuous improvement. Kate?
Well, if you get 2 words, I get 2 words. I'm going to say creative flexibility.
All right. And Jean-Claude, you're rounding us out.
Yeah, I also had sustainability, so I'm going to change it to inclusive innovation. I'll cheat as well. I have 2 words.
I love it. I love it. Inclusive innovation. So, Dr. Bey, I would love for you to kick us off with just this high-level reflection on what are some of the emerging trends in recruitment and retention that are proven effective in attracting educators and staff to the education sector.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I strongly believe that to attract and retain educators, you must have a multifaceted strategy and approach. And so what we've seen work thus far in DCPS is, competitive-based pay and performance-based bonus structures. We're proud to have one of the highest starting salaries for educators. And while we know that monetary reasons aren't the only reason why people go into education, we feel really strongly that it's essential to demonstrate in the boldest way possible how much we value our workers. That also includes signing bonuses for high need content areas such as special education, STEM, ESL. We also look at establishing innovative partnerships with community organizations and schools in order to place residents and really look at how we are able to develop folks as they continue in various spaces. And then lastly, I would say partnership with universities. We've been able to create a really robust pipeline for new teachers through onboarding programs that are very comprehensive and allow for us to, really develop grow your own residency partnerships with local universities such as American University to build out our pipelines. And so those are some of the things that I've seen that have worked with us in DCPS, both in the recruitment space as well as in the retention space of how is it that we are able to provide continuous and high-level professional development to our teachers, as well as creating pathways for talented educators to expand their reach and become teacher leaders and grow within the district.
I love that. I love that. Kate, from your perspective and the line of sight that you have, can you share just any of the effective trends and strategies that you're seeing across the country?
Yes, definitely. Well, first, I mean, Dr. Bey, I think it's great that you led with compensation and the importance of compensation. I think educators absolutely deserve to be well compensated and to not be, not have to be apologetic about that. I think in addition to compensation, I see other ways that schools are recognizing what I would call the human needs of our educator workforce. So important for both attraction and retention is offering mental health supports, wellness supports for the staff. I think everyone is realizing that these jobs are hard at times. I think there's a lot of great talent out there that is up for that, but they want to know that they're going to be able to take those moments and have strategies for taking care of themselves while they work. So I think that's become really important. Also, flexibility in schedules, even some openness to remote work days or elements of a schedule, especially for specialized staff. We see that a lot, certainly in special education departments, that ability to offer some amount of remote work. I've seen it as a great retention strategy when you have a beloved staff member who is relocating, possibly for personal reasons, but really wants to and can maintain that connection to their students in the district through remote work.
Okay. All right. Dr. James, we'd love to hear from you as well.
So much, Tiffany. So I'm thinking right now about our pre-K for employees, offering pre-K opportunities for our employees. Also our self-funded insurance program for employees that work in our district. And then with that comes the staff wellness center, kind of what Kate just talked about, that, making sure that our staff is well and healthy, both emotionally and physically, to be able to do the very tough work that it is to educate our students. So.
Yeah. So, Jean-Claude, we've heard about the importance of compensation, clarity of pathways, making sure our educators are well and healthy, flexibility as relates to scheduling. What are some other emerging trends that you're seeing, just given the innovation work that you are exposed to around the country?
Tiffany, first of all, thank you for having me. And I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said. One thing to know about us at Digital Promise is we tend to sort of work along three different bodies of work. So it's learning sciences research, it's technology or emerging technologies, and it's practice. We tend to center practitioners in our design process to really understand what is happening on the ground. So there are three words perhaps I think about in addition to what's been said. One is, again, pipeline. But not just a pipeline for the traditional pipeline, but multiple pathways to the profession. I think is really important. We're watching more and more of that happening, especially around digital credentialing and ways of really incentivizing non-traditionals perhaps into the profession, as well as thinking about, teachers of color and making sure that the workforce is diverse. The second one is really around retention. There are many reasons why we lose teachers. We spend a lot of time recruiting them, and then we may lose them a year or two. For example, I chair the board of Teach for America here in the Bay Area in California. It's a big focus for us. It's not just getting core members into the profession, but making sure they stay and do the work that we need to do. Last thing I'll say is thriving. And this is where, for me, the word sustainability comes from. Again, as a former school leader, as a former superintendent, I often say the profession is unsustainable. So Cal Bazil at ASU often talks about the fact that the one teacher, one pod ideal is obsolete and doesn't work. How do we rethink the mental model for teaching to make the profession much more sustainable? Is something I'm watching emerge from a number of partners of ours across the country doing amazing work in school districts right now.
I appreciate that. And I think, Dr. Bey, that's a great segue to the question I'd like to pass to you, just this idea of rethinking the mental models and really thinking about retention strategies, making sure we not only attract educators to the pipeline and get them in our systems and get great leaders and support them, but also retain them. So would love to hear specifically, what are some of the strategies you're leveraging in the district as it relates to recruitment and retaining them? And then how do you think some of those strategies will be impacted by expiring pandemic era use of funds?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you heard me talk about, signing bonuses and high need content areas. One of the things that we were able to really do with the stimulus funds was really move to a more robust recruitment, marketing, and advertising, strategy. In DCPS, we compete against charter schools as well as neighboring districts in Maryland and Virginia for great talent. And so we've really beefed up our recruitment, marketing, and advertising strategies, in order to capture the best talent in the area. We've also worked with various external partners, like, for example, Teach Upbeat is an external partner that we've piloted and worked with this year to provide one-on-one coaching to schools who have seen the highest rates of attrition. As was just indicated, like it's one thing to recruit teachers, it's another thing to actually retain them, and really looking at our data across all 117 schools that we have in order to see where are we seeing higher rates of attrition and what can we do to specifically support those school leaders and those school communities in being able to identify what the issues are and how we can support them in order to keep more of their teachers in place. Now that we know that those funds are sunsetting, we are exploring alternative funding sources, but we're also continuing to think strategically about how we can use the available funds that we have in the most impactful way. And so one of the things that we have learned and that we are really working to do is amplify one of our strongest levers for recruitment, which I believe is word of mouth referrals. We know one of the main drivers for applicants is what they hear about DCPS from our current staff. And so ensuring that we have well-rounded approaches to talent where we focus on staff retention and satisfaction, as what was, just alluded to earlier, we know will in turn lead to a better reputation as a destination where candidates want to be and want to stay. We have also really, again, leveraged external partners to work with us around best practices and strategies for the years to come. We recognize that when it comes to talent, recruitment, and retention, it's the long game, right? It's not something that is going to change overnight, but building strong practices both centrally throughout the district, as well as with particular communities that have had challenges in retaining teachers, particularly very talented teachers, we know will lead to sustainable growth.
I appreciate that. And Kate, we've just heard from Dr. Bey, we've just heard from Jean-Claude about, what it means for us to just think about the retention and supporting our educators. And we just cannot talk about staffing shortages without thinking about what that support looks like. And we're constantly seeing these headlines. Again, you brought it up, or you spoke to it earlier about low compensation and dissatisfaction, quite honestly, with the work environment. So what else are you hearing from educators and practitioners by way of what they're looking for? And can we even provide those things? Is the ecosystem set up to actually provide and respond to what our educators and future educators are telling us that they want to not only come to the system, but stay in the system and thrive to help accelerate learning for students across the country?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think so many people are drawn to work in education because they want to have an impact. And when I examine the reasons why people are leaving schools or considering leaving, it's because they feel like they can't have an impact. And it's often because the workload is too much. The day-to-day is feels too out of control, right? There's a lot of playing defense. There's a lot of responding, reacting in the moment. And it can feel really hard when there's so much that you need to do and not enough time to do it all. It can be really hard to stay motivated. And we see at presence, we have a lot of people apply to come do teletherapy with us. I think because they're looking for a way to still have impact, still work with these students, but to take more control of the workload, to be able to set more guardrails or limits. And I think some of the most innovative schools are seeing that and realizing there's a lot of things that you can do to address that workload overload or that feeling of a lack of control. Partnered with Dr. James at Corpus Christi to use our network of teletherapists as a backup to cover the backlogs of psych evaluations or the comp time for special education therapy services, ways to take pieces of the workload off of the on-site staff so that they don't feel like things are piling up and there's no way to get back in control. And I think when you do that, you drive really great retention in the schools and you get that longevity because I think people really want to stay and they really want to do the work. They just want to feel like they can have that impact and feel good about it.
I appreciate that because what I'm hearing you talk about is not only the desire to have impact or have some sort of, ability to set boundaries and have a manageable workload. And it's, still be ambitious, still go above and beyond for our students and our communities. But also I'm hearing you talk a lot about agency, right? And being a part of some of this creation of solutions that will create those conditions. So really appreciate you lifting that up. And Jean-Claude, I think this would be a really great time to hear from you as it relates to some of the inclusive innovation, right? That the Digital Promise is committed to and taking some really great big leaps, quite honestly, in that area. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the initiatives that you have been created that you've seen to enable teachers of color specifically to really lean into that pipeline and address some of the shortage challenges that we're seeing across the country?
Tiffany, thanks. This goes back to 2021 when we began to look at the issue and quickly came organically from our districts. We work with about 160 school districts in the US, over 300, but 160 are part of the League of Innovative Schools. And they were really concerned, frankly, about the retention in teachers of color. And to give you some ideas around the data that were pushing to us, we absorbed over half of the kids or learners in the US are kids of color, and only about 18% of teachers are teachers of color. Only about 2% of teachers are African American males. So we certainly have an issue, especially when you have a lot of young people who are kids of color who want to look to people that look like them to be teaching them, and they don't see it. We found to be a real issue. So we curated these tables, hence the expression of inclusive innovation, that had, for example, local community, school district leadership, teachers themselves, the accreditation bodies, the professional learning bodies, the state agencies, etc., and went through a design process by really centering teacher voice, and a number of things quickly begin to emerge. One, again, not just about recruitment, but retention. On the recruitment end, they really push for this idea of multiple pathways to the profession, right? Making sure that we understood, first of all, first and foremost, why we're not getting enough teachers of color applying for the position. One was that when you look at high school graduation, college, persistent and completion, we have a dearth of issues there because of a number of things that happens in K-16 or K-12 for that matter, right? From suspensions to an issue of completion. You don't have a robust pipeline of folks who actually are getting there. School cultures often are not one that really embraces teachers of color and have them thrive. So, when I was a principal, I was told by my boss, it's not about the kids, it's about the teachers. If you take care of the teachers, they'll take care of the children. And she also said to me, the best gift you can give to a teacher is a great principal. So be that for them, right? So a lot of that organically came out in those salons or these design sessions with folks who really understand what they need to be done. But one we heard quite clear was access to a great professional network. So folks had a place to talk to colleagues about challenges and issues and assets. Another one was a safety, meaning a place where they can air out issues and challenges they're experiencing. Having that kind of a culture and structure in a school where folks can liberally talk about the challenges was something folks really talked about. Mental health, we heard that just before. I think KJ talked about this. The mental health that folks were experiencing. And the workload that many of the teachers have, very often, again, they're minorities in their schools, is that they often are looked to holding the bucket. So not just their job, their everyday job, but they look to diversity conversations. If you have a Black kid who's having an issue, they call Mr. Brizard to come in and help him deal with him. So that was an additional layer of cognitive load that folks frankly had to experience in their schools. So all these things, we have a full set of reports on our website that folks can actually go to that describes in very detail the findings and the recommendations. And by the way, there are 6 school districts that really went headfirst in designing against that. And they also have their own recommendations as to how they're able to overcome all of that. But the whole, the Center of Excellence within Digital Promise is made for this idea of centering the voices of practitioners in the design process.
Yeah, I really like that. And Dr. Bey, this idea of centering the voice of educators, and I really appreciate what Jean-Claude has highlighted around this idea of the gift of a great leader, right, to educators, and making sure that there are support systems and networks that allow them to contribute to a thriving culture. And so when you think about some of the challenges education leaders face in providing ongoing professional development or access to professional networks that Jean-Claude has referenced, what are some of the ways that you're overcoming that in the district, and how are you leveraging technology to overcome some of those challenges to ensure that ongoing learning and professional development opportunities actually exist?
Yeah, thank you for the question. During the pandemic, as with many districts across the country,
and Dr. Bey, I'm sorry, I think my internet was a little spotty, but sorry for cutting you off.
Okay, no worries. Can you hear me now? Perfect. So just was saying, during the pandemic, as with many districts across the country, we did virtual professional development. And while it didn't come without challenges, it provided an opportunity for our district to learn and be able to quickly become proficient in developing really high quality virtual professional development. It also allowed us to use models of professional learning that we really hadn't leveraged before. And so some of the things that we learned in terms of utilizing technology and particularly virtual professional learning opportunities was one, asynchronous professional development can be a game changer, right? Offering asynchronous content allowed for flexible scheduling. It allowed for us to alleviate some of the scheduling pressures that, trying to make sure that teachers and staff have as it relates to professional development. And so I'll use as an example, this year in DCPS, we launched a self-paced training for all of our new K-2 English language arts teachers. And by offering this asynchronously, we were able to allow teachers to engage in smaller chunks of content at a time and closely tie the schedule of learning to the work that they were doing in real time in their classrooms throughout the year. We also utilize technology related to large-scale professional development or district professional development, which we know sometimes contains logistical challenges with very high costs associated. And so technology has really made it a bit easier for us to scale professional development across the entire district and reach even more educators with fewer costs and facilitator needs. I'll use as another example, this year we rolled out a brand new math curriculum to over 500 pre-K teachers and 500 paraprofessionals using more of a hybrid approach. We were able to pair 3 in-person professional development days with an asynchronous set of 12 webinars that teachers and paraprofessionals were able to use and engage with on partial professional development days. And this solved for 2 challenges. It solved for the space and logistics constraints that did not allow us all the time to bring together such a large number of teachers and paraprofessionals in one place in person. But the webinars also allowed for collaboration and shared learning between the teacher teams. Those webinars also allowed us to leverage time on half-day professional development days to continue with curriculum training. While we know that it's often not enough time to bring people together, but teachers do have time to engage with webinars at their school sites. And I would lastly say, an added benefit is that these webinars that we were able to create we know will be able to be used in the future as we onboard new teachers and as a resource to teachers who want to revisit the material or for teachers who just need that additional support.
I appreciate that. And Jean-Claude, are you seeing any other ways that districts and school leaders are leveraging technology to overcome some of these challenges and create even more opportunities for professional development?
Absolutely. So professional learning, to Dr. Bey's point, was really critical in what we found, for example, with all teachers and especially teachers of color. One of the things, so let me step back and talk a little bit about some of the work that we do and why this is so important. We've leveraged Todd Rose's work around the end of average, looking at the jagged learner profile of each student. Dr. Rose says there is no such thing as the average person or the average student, yet everything in education is built around the average student. 3-hour test, you name it. So if everyone has a jagged learner profile and you have 30 or 34, whatever the number is in a classroom, they expect one individual, one adult to address the learner variability of every single student. That is not possible. So in rethinking the mental model, can we think of a team of adults, including the family and the parent? And by the way, there are examples of folks beginning to do this work. You have Washington, D.C. with City Bridge and others, frankly. If you think of a team of adults serving the needs of children, and this is where I think technology, including artificial intelligence, can be part of the work and the effort in creating that kind of full support for young people. So education resources strategies, we'll link in the chat as well, is begun to do this work. Not yet with the technology, they're getting there, but it's them in ASU, and there's a case study in their report here on Maryland and in Texas about how this work is actually beginning. But really leveraging technology to not only provide synchronous or asynchronous or blended professional learning opportunities, but artificial intelligence can really play an amazing role in serving as in tutor, providing just-in-time support for young people, alleviating the workload that you have with teachers, for example. Again, not just in planning and writing lessons, but go beyond that. Think about what this could mean for assessment. Right? All this becomes part of the mix that really can help us reinvent teaching, reinvent education, and provide much better personalized support for young people.
I appreciate that. And Dr. James, we've been spending the last portion of our time talking about supports for educators, professional development networks. As an incoming superintendent coming from a curriculum and instructional leadership role, what does curriculum and instruction play? Like, what role does it play in educator job satisfaction? And is there something that we could be doing in this space and on that front that will make the roles easier or even more engaging?
Absolutely. I think several people have already kind of discussed that, Tiffany, but I want to highlight some places that we've been working in Corpus Christi, where I was, and I know that we're talking about that here in Willis. That's number one, is creating mentorship programs, as we've talked about, mentorship programs and residencies to help teachers or potential clinical teachers really understand the role of teaching. Those have been extended from a half year to a whole year in some cases here in Texas. We've been working with US Prep on that and our local university, TAMU-CC, Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi. That has been very, very beneficial. And from that spun off that mentorship, which is pairing a new teacher with an experienced mentor. And sometimes we've even used that with online services. And so it may not be just someone that's in their campus, but someone is across the district. I think that we've worked with ERS on helping to reduce and identify things that we can reduce the initial workload of a teacher, meaning that maybe they have a lighter teaching load because they're working with a more experienced teacher. They're only teaching one content versus maybe multiple contents. Looking at strategic staffing, making sure that maybe teachers are paired up to work together on that. And as I said, I think that that's been very beneficial. I know Dr. Bey talked about professional learning communities. I think those are some ways that we can really help our new young teachers, as well as the teachers that have more experience as well. I love when you talked about creating that leadership pipeline. I do believe that so goes so goes the principal, so goes the campus. And so we've worked a lot with Holdsworth in Austin, Texas, to help establish really robust principal pipelines on how to help principals and those that aspire to be a principal really understand the workload, as I believe that Kate talked about, the whole day-to-day, how they manage, and that comes in scheduling. So lastly, I would talk about creative scheduling, how we're creating and developing a day for a teacher and looking at when is the best time to provide that PLC structure, when is the best time, to put those teachers together to be able to really work together to help brainstorm and identify. And then lastly, I'm going to continue to always come back to such as presence, but making sure that people have access to mental health and wellness support, because we all know when that job, we are coming to this field because of our heart, right? And so sometimes when we're giving our heart, that means that we're giving our mind, and it really utilizes all the strength and that we have in resolve of our bodies. And so I think that's super important to really close that up with that. So
I appreciate that. And Kate, Dr. James just talked to us a little bit about the curriculum and instructional importance. And Jean-Claude began to talk about the ways that ed tech and technology can support some of the strategies. When you think about the work that we're trying to take on to amplify the impact of existing teachers and specialized staff, what other ways should ed tech be leveraged or used to do just that?
So I think that a lot of what ed tech can do is help make the most of every minute that we do have from an educator. And one of the very central strategies for the technology we build at Presence, for example, is to build as much as we can to do the unimportant work or the paperwork, right? Paperwork is
Yes.
something that takes a ton of time, that is not the best and highest use of anyone's time in a school. So, when we build a tool that can, for example, documentation of therapy session notes, with what you can do with technology today, we can, create that starting point where we say, right, here are all the activities that you did in your session, and here's how much time you spent on each, right? Like creating those outlines to build from for documents and reporting, I think is a huge time saver. I think Dr. James talked about scheduling. I mean, you can't underestimate like just the time and the slog that can be to build out the most effective schedules. And it really matters to try to maximize the number of students that someone can see and impact in a year. So being able to, use AI to help determine, okay, if I take all of these children with all of these needs and all of these parameters of their schedules, what would be an optimal grouping to ensure that as many of them get seen in the right environment as possible. So, there's so much important, impactful educational work to be done, and so very much, administrative manual work that's needed that goes into making that happen. And so the more from that second category that we can take, and technology can just do a lot of that work, especially with the capabilities of AI now. So I think that, the best way, I think, for EdTech to approach it is to really look at what are all of the things that you have to spend time doing in education that you don't really want to spend time doing. Let's see if we can build something to help shorten that time.
Tiffany, can I add one layer to Kate's response, which I think is spot on. One of the things we're beginning to see is this kind of feedback loops between practitioners and technologists. So you think of a product, for example, who wants to get better, but to do so in a way that really leverages the teaching force in this kind of iteration process of saying, what are you struggling with? What do you think of this particular solution? That kind of informing of the improvement or the addition, for example, of AI into a product, we found to be fascinating because one, it makes a product better. Two, it's an amazing professional learning activity for teachers where they are involved with a developer in iterating. If I watch ASU/GSV begin to do the same thing, frankly, by having these triads, these triumvirate showing up in San Diego, where folks are talking to each other about the development of a product, but where it's facilitated in that kind of curated process is amazing for the teacher and amazing for the product developer as well.
But Jean-Claude, I really appreciate what you were talking to us about around these important feedback loops between editors and technologists, and some of the things that we've really been focused on by way of bringing educators and entrepreneurs together to ensure that they understand that those types of conversations, co-creating solutions, not just to improve the product, but also to think about the how of implementation and to actually ensure that entrepreneurs are supporting the work that educators are taking on to ensure they're making good on the priorities and commitments to students and educators and communities, but also that educators, like to your point, are learning from and informing some of the innovations that are being created. That's how we're going to do this work together. And I actually think that sets us up really well for the question I have for Dr. Bey and Dr. James, because as educators, we know that no matter how sound a strategy is, we can't do this work alone or in a silo. And so, Dr. Bey, would love to hear from you first. Who are some of the key partners that are helping you address some of the issues that we've talked about? So, examples of partnerships between districts and other organizations, be it vendors or teachers unions or universities, as you mentioned earlier in the call, those partners that have really succeeded in helping you to create and implement, right, the strategies to support recruitment and retention.
Yeah, thank you. So in DCPS, we actually partner with 4 teacher residency programs. We partner with City Teaching Alliance, Relay Graduate School of Education, the Howard University right here in Washington, D.C., and Georgetown University. These programs prepare our participants by having them serve as educational aides during their residency year while working towards their master's degree and training alongside highly effective mentor teachers. And, mentoring was mentioned earlier as a key strategy. And then after their residency is complete, they become a coveted source of lead teacher talent within our schools. I mean, when we look at the data in terms of the percentage of teachers who are actually hired as first-time teachers from these residency programs, they really are strong partners that we have in order to build our pipeline. We also partner with a number of local colleges and universities to not only help place student teachers, but support various, as I mentioned, residency type models as we think about our own grow your own talent. For instance, I mentioned earlier this partnership with American University in 2021, which recruits high school students when they receive full scholarships to complete their master's degree in 5 years. And then these educators then commit to teaching in a DCPS school for another 5 years. So that has been truly game-changing for us. I would also say that we recognize the potential of our paraprofessionals and our educational aides and have invested significant time and attention to developing sustainable pathways to support those who are interested in taking on lead teacher positions. And so this has included access to financial aid for continuing education and access to study preparation materials for the praxis exam. And so really taking a comprehensive approach to really look at all of our talent within the district in order to create opportunities for new teachers to come into the profession in various pipelines, as Jean-Claude was talking about earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Bey. We too, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we have a great partnership with US Prep, which has connected us with our university, the local university in our city, which is Corpus Christi, and that would be TAM-UCC. Texas A&M University. And then we've also established a new partnership. We're moving forward with UT in Austin with helping support our math teachers with behavior-based mindsetting and shifting in teaching mathematics. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. As you said, going back to that teacher or the leadership pipeline, we've worked with Holdsworth in Austin. We've also worked with Relay Graduate as well to help our principals, sitting principals in coaching our teachers. And so I think that's really been a benefit to us. When we're talking about just the climate of our campuses and how we think that everybody knows how to build relationships right up front. And I will tell you that not everybody understands how to build relationships in the classroom. And so utilizing different kinds of programs, such as a Capturing Kids' Hearts in Texas, that has been just fabulous for helping us to establish a codified way to learn and help teachers identify strong ways to build relationships with students, but also with each other, which breaks down the barriers for them to be able to work interactively together to build stronger instructional programs. I mentioned that about strategic staffing and building the best master schedule. Kate talked about that, and we have been working with ERS on that. And that has just been an amazing partnership as well. When we talk about curriculum implementation, School Kit, Carnegie, Amplify, those have been some really, really wonderful partners, both face-to-face instruction, but there's opportunities that we can put teachers together with people electronically, like we're talking right now on Zoom and Teams. And so that's also helped to provide that. I'm trying to think of some other, those are some, TNTP. I'm going to tell you, as we roll out curriculum implementation, new curriculum, TNTP has been fabulous with us helping us get feedback and also making sure that they are helping us with that plan, the strategic plan of rolling out. Anytime you're rolling out new curriculum, you have to definitely have a wonderful plan. And they have just been instrumental in helping us build that plan from the ground up. That's the thing I would probably want to really emphasize on TNTP. So thank you.
Perfect. And so before we shift gears and turn to questions from the audience, I'd love to hear from each of you on this last question. And so what is one way educational leaders can stay ahead of the curve in adopting and implementing new technologies and strategies for professional development? And Jean-Claude, I'd love to start with you. And then Dr. James, I'm gonna turn things over to you, okay?
So I would say very quickly, Tiffany, what I think Dr. James just really outlined a number of different ways partners are supporting the effort. you don't have to go on this alone, I think is the headline, right? Lots of folks working on this. TNTP is ASU, Education Resource Strategies, Public Impact. So the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at ASU is working with a bunch of districts on this. If you're part of ASA, with Fort Futures in Pittsburgh, lots of folks are beginning to tackle this in really good, substantial ways. Find a partner, dive in. There are real solutions to the challenge.
I love it. All right.
And so many times, I just want to echo what you just said, Jean-Claude. The other thing that I want to add is so many times we can find grants to help support that and pay, to find funding sources that will help school districts to do that. And we have really, in Texas, seen a lot of success with even our education agency providing opportunities to write grants and then partner with these. In fact, every organization that I've just named have come from relationships that we received through grants through our state agency. So I definitely want to say that's been a positive thing. The other thing that you just asked about was, even just what we do in our own districts. We have some fabulous technology departments that, we look at the curriculum that we use and we identify what are the what is the technology that we use, and we contact those companies or those programs to come into our district. We invite other people from around our district to come in and actually teach. If we are using Carnegie and Matthew is the technology that we use to help implement that, they come to our district, which is what we've had. This is our 10th year. We're very excited about to celebrate. What we have is it's called a tech to teach opportunity, where our technology department with our instructional technology, with our teachers, and then with these partners that we have come in and actually teach our teachers for 2 to 3 days on how we're utilizing the curriculum and how to best implement it, then using that blended model learning approach. And so I think it's to not do it alone. As Jean-Claude said, it's so important for us to reach out and partner with the innovators of our innovators of technology. I'm losing my words, but I think that's really important. And then finding ways to help supplement that with the funds that are out there, because people want us to win, right? We want us to win and win with our students, because when we win, our students win. And so thank you for having this opportunity to speak about this.
Thank you. And Dr. Bey?
Sorry, that coming off mute thing. You would think I would know by now. I would say, I definitely agree with what was already shared. I know that what has worked for us, and this may, sound small, but it is truly, it truly helps us in terms of starting small and scaling up. And so before we roll out a new plan or program district-wide, even as it relates to technology, we typically pilot with a smaller group of schools or users that are excited and willing to try something different. Because we still have educators and even school leaders who are a little bit apprehensive when it comes to too much new technology all at the same time. And so by starting small and scaling up, it allows us to better understand implementation, develop resources, plan for misunderstandings before we work with a larger audience. And so just, for example, some of our DCPS elementary educators this year piloted to leverage Canvas, our learning management system, as a part of their daily instruction. And they were able to practice embedding components of the learning management system strategically and meaningfully throughout the day with K-5 learners. And so that's allowed us to learn best practices, see areas that we need to troubleshoot as we think about how we expand that more broadly across all of our elementary schools.
Appreciate that. Kate?
I would say, don't be embarrassed to admit that you haven't fully educated yourself on AI, writing prompts, right? Like, we are all learning an entirely new language, and it is not too late to dive in, and it's okay to be a beginner. I had the opportunity to attend a state superintendent's retreat recently where I thought they did the most wonderful thing, where they were having a session on practicing writing ChatGPT prompts. And before that, they were available for an hour to help anyone who didn't yet have a login for ChatGPT come and set up their account and, learn the basics of how to work in it. And, there were plenty of people that needed that, of course. And I just thought it was so great to recognize that we are still all early in learning the language. And it's just important to all be students of it. And along those lines, the other thing that I'd say is that I really recommend getting into the classroom and watching technology in use, watching what students are doing, watching what teachers are doing. There's already a lot of amazing, individuals who have figured out something that, you'll be able to see and, imagine how you can scale that, how you can apply it in other contexts. And I think there's so much to be gained just by observing what's already happening in pockets around schools.
Appreciate that. Well, we have time for one question, and we have a few from our audience. So we're going to shift gears and open it up to those. And so in this last couple of minutes, we'd love to hear reflections on this question from our audience. Where are certain areas that you think technology may not have a significant role to play when it comes to educator engagement? So we've talked about areas where it will play a significant role as it relates to impact or accelerating learning or educator engagement. And let's talk about the shadow side of that question. What areas do we think it will not have a significant role to play? Who would like to kick us off there?
I'll go quickly, Tiffany. So it's not really shadow, but education is human development, right? And you cannot replace that connection that the adult has with the child, or that two people have with each other. So that technology can never replace.
I appreciate that. And so many conversations I've appreciated that us really making sure that we stay grounded in the humanity of teaching and learning is so important. And so I'm excited to hear not only educators, but also technologists really start to ground themselves there. Dr. James, I saw you come off mute.
I was going to
Anything
echo
to
what
add
you
there?
said. Yeah, Jean-Claude, is that the teacher themselves cannot be replaced. There still has to be that human side, the side that is empathetic, the side that's sympathetic, the side that actually reaches into the heart and helps inspires kids to want to do more and learn more. So I definitely agree with that. However, I'm going to say I cannot think of anything that we don't use technology for. There is always a way to use technology. So that is why we have to stay up to date with technology and constantly evolve with the technology, because I have to be able to pass that on to my students or my teachers, my fellow peers. And so I think that's really important, that we have to stay current. It's so important. I think that was a question we talked about earlier, is while the teacher is never replaced, we have to constantly evolve.
Okay. Kate or Dr. Bey, anything on that
I think
question?
the only thing that I would layer on, I agree. The teacher can't be replaced, right? And so, that human-centered kind of approach to teaching and learning must remain, and must be, to me, must center the student experience, right? Because it's not just about technology, it's about all of the connections and relationships that are able to be built through teaching and learning, and just some of the things that occur at our schools, both, teacher to student, but also student to student, as well as teacher to other teachers and colleagues. I would say the biggest thing, though, that we have to make sure that we continue to monitor is the implementation of that technology, right? It's the same with curriculum. You can have a great curriculum, but if it's not implemented with fidelity, if guidelines aren't, or not guidelines, but guardrails aren't provided, if additional support isn't provided, right, it can be used in a way that is not intended. And I think technology falls into that same bracket, that continuing to think about continuous improvement, innovation as it relates to technology, and how do we bring people on board that may not be as comfortable, right? Like may not be as comfortable with the technology that we believe is the game changer in terms of efficiency. How do we take a human-centered approach to make sure that we don't lose teachers or lose educators who are intimidated by some of the technology and the growth and development that happens at a really exponential rate these days? Folks may feel like they can't catch up or that they can't keep up. And so how do we, really take a human-centered approach to really support them through that? I think is going to be key.
I love it. Kate, anything to add before we close?
I would just, I want to second and third that concept of the human-centered approach, and just say, I feel, as my fellow panelists do, there's no place that technology can't be used, but there's a lot of ways that it can be misused. So
Yes.
I think the key is always being, strategic and thoughtful about how we try to use it to facilitate those human connections.
I appreciate it. I think that's really a great place to end. And so I want to say thank you to all of our panelists for taking time to join us. So Kate, Jean-Claude, Dr. Bey, and Dr. James, thanks so much for just sharing your wisdom, your insights, and some of your greatest hopes for the future of this work. And thank you to all of our guests who joined us, and thank you for recognizing the importance of this conversation and this work. And just thanks in advance for all you're doing to lead and to support current and future educators around the country.
Thanks for having us, Tiffany.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely.